Place Services.
Thank you. Ken Buchan.
Good morning, everyone. Ken Buchan, the Head of Environment and Wellbeing at Dorset Council.
Christian Evans.
Morning all, Christian Evans, Finance Service Manager for Place.
Thank you, Christian. Jamie Joyce.
Good morning, everybody. New Harbour Master for Weymouth.
Thank you. And this is your first formal meeting, so you're very welcome, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
James Radcliffe.
Good morning, James Radcliffe, Harbour Master at Brookport and Lyme Regis.
Matthew Penny.
Morning all, Matthew Penny, Engineering Projects Manager for the Council.
Thank you, Matthew. Claire Connolly.
Good morning all, Claire Connolly, Finance and Admin Manager for Weymouth Harbour.
Lara Altree.
Good morning, I'm Lara Altree, I'm a solicitor with Dorset Council.
Thank you, Lara. And Denise Hunt, our Democratic Services Officer. Are you there, Denise?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm the Democratic Services Officer. While speaking, Chairman, I can see Councillor O'Leary has a point of order in the chat bar.
Yeah, sorry, apparently this isn't being broadcast. There's nothing showing up on the live feed.
Is Darren there? Are we live?
Oh. It's just that it's been put on Harbours Committee. Anyone else able to see it? I noticed at 12 who were watching has gone down. Not the first time this is possibly because there is nothing apparently being broadcast. Not the first time this has happened. Councillor Knock Lacey Clark also says this is correct.
Yes, we can.
Only just, Darren.
It must have resolved itself then, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you very much. We also, I think, have in attendance today Knock Lacey Clark, lead member for Place, with particular reference to Harbours today. So good morning, Knock.
Good morning, Mark.
And I think we will be joined by Councillor Ray Bryan. I know he has another meeting at the moment, Cabinet member for Place. Right, the first item on the agenda was the apologies, which was Jim Clark. Now we move on to item 2, the minutes. Are we going to bring those up onto the screen?
Chairman, the pack is available on the Dorset Council website.
Okay, I think all the members have had the minutes. Is everybody content with the minutes, or are there any matters arising?
Content, Chair.
All okay, Chair.
Thank you. If everyone's happy, we'll move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest?
Yes, from me, Chair, member of Weymouth Sailing Club.
Steve Pittman, we will note that. No other expressions of interest? We move on now then to item 4, the public participation. And of course, in these COVID times, there isn't an opportunity for public questions, but we have received written questions, and Karen Punchard will be reading out the written questions and Denise Hunt will be reading out the written replies to those. So if we can move on to that, the first question, please, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's the other way around. Denise is going to read the question and I'm going to read the response.
I do apologise, yes.
No problem. Denise.
Thank you, Chairman. The first question is from Richard Bright Paul. The question is, the Dorset Council strategic plan for harbours to be developed in the coming months needs to develop a clear shared vision for Weymouth Harbour, understand its many issues, scope out potential strategic options to tackle each of those issues, and decide which of those options should form the Council's strategies. We are given to understand that the heavy lifting work of developing this plan is to be undertaken by this committee, with subsequent review of a draft plan by local stakeholders. This process seems rather upside down. Does the Chair not agree that it would be better to engage key stakeholders in each of its harbours, who have intimate knowledge of the issues in the development of a draft plan, rather than at a later stage? Those draft strategy proposals, engaging experts on the ground, could then be presented to this committee, thus using the Harbours Committee in a role better suited to its time constraints and capabilities as a review and approval body. That concludes the question from Mr. Bright Paul.
Thank you. Can we have the written answer, please, Karen?
The Council has used independent facilitators to engage with harbour users across the 3 Dorset Council harbours through virtual workshops and online paper surveys, resulting in over 500 responses. Information has been gathered about how the harbours currently work, existing issues, and what stakeholders would like to see from harbours in the future. The next stage in this process is for a working group of the committee to develop a draft vision and strategic priorities for the harbours, with initial engagement with the harbours consultative groups. This will then be consulted upon more widely. Rather than harbour users only having the opportunity to comment on a draft plan, as suggested in the question, we have established an iterative process with harbour user consultation at various stages. This is likely to include more direct consultation with target groups, where we can utilise the expertise and experiences referred to shape a strategy which will benefit everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
There's a question from Susan Boyd. At the last Dorset Harbours Committee meeting on September the 23rd, 2020, Dorset Council stated that it now has the design for the Weymouth Quay regeneration project. What plans, if any, does Dorset Council have to share the design with Weymouth Harbour users prior to the plans being submitted for consent? That concludes the question.
And the response? The only change to the design previously seen by harbour users is the relocation of the Centre of Excellence to the town. Aspects of the plan previously described, such as the fish landing quay, fuel and ice facilities, commercial fisheries compound, harbour office storage, training space and a public walkway around the peninsula are all still included. An updated plan can be seen on the Dorset Council website. It is likely, because the development is within the harbour estate and that works are harbour related, it will fall under permitted development, not requiring planning consent. And it is hoped to start work in March 2021. The development will hug the harbour quayside, leaving a significant amount of space on the peninsula for future development. The old harbour buildings on the peninsula will be demolished over the next 3 to 4 months. Thank you.
Thanks. And the next question, please, Denise.
There are 2 questions from Mary Harris. Question 1 is, There remains a significant issue with Dorset Council's involvement of the harbour community in its plans. The current processes stifle community involvement and frustrate communications. Every major council decision in the recent past has completely lacked community engagement, resulting in protests, complaints, and costly decision reversals. The Harbours Consultative Group, supposedly tasked with gaining customer and stakeholder insights, has clearly failed to do so on every recent occasion. 97% of businesses in the harbour and 100% of residents have no access to the Harbour Consultative Group, and the group has failed to bring a single issue before the Harbours Committee for resolution in the last decade. There are many pertinent issues, some relating to safety, becoming more urgent by the day. Could the Harbours Committee Chairman specifically order some real customer research on the matter and order a proper and immediate review to enable better dialogue and decision making between Dorset Council and the harbour stakeholders going forward? That concludes the first question.
And the response, the existing consultative group aims to balance harbour user representation with a sensible group size. Current members have dedicated a significant amount of time and effort on a voluntary basis to represent their harbour user sector. It's clearly not possible to have members from all harbour-related groups and businesses, so it is necessary for representatives to canvass those they represent about issues and bring these to the consultative group meetings. Comments made at the last Harbours Committee highlighted the difficulty that representatives have getting information from some users and the problems some users have in identifying their representative. To resolve this issue, we have revamped the website page where consultative group information is held and made it easier to find. We are progressing putting links on relevant web pages to take anyone direct to their representative's contact details. And all new customers receive a "Have we told you everything" letter once their berth allocation is complete. We are updating this to be more specific about the consultative group and to include representatives' names. Furthermore, it's been suggested that the workload of representatives could be shared with their substitutes, allowing for wider reach prior to the meetings, but this is to be discussed further. The new Weymouth Harbour Master will be engaging with harbour-related groups and users, and we are considering establishing open review meetings a couple of times a year for harbour users to highlight any ongoing issues. Over the past few weeks, this mechanism has been used successfully to mitigate concerns and issues arising from the rail removal works on Custom House Quay, ensuring access to both vessels, fish landing quay and businesses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. And if we have the second question, please, Denise.
Denise, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. The second question from Mary Harris. The imminent repair works that are shortly due to commence to the Harbour Wall on Noath Parade are directly outside our premises at Old Harbour Dive Centre. Whilst there are predominantly residential properties in this area, our premises, being the only commercial property along Noath Parade, we believe will be adversely affected by this work, even though we understand it will all be from the seaward side. Could or have the committee taken into account the interruption this will cause to our business? As a special case, would the committee request the council to look at some compensatory measures for us? That concludes the second question.
And the response. The initial works that are due to take place to the Harbour Wall along Noath Parade are site investigation works. The site investigations are due to start in mid to late February and last approximately 1 to 2 weeks. Letters went out last week to residents and businesses to ask about projects or activities they may be undertaking that the site investigation works could adversely impact upon. The investigation work is likely to result in the closure of Knowth Parade along this section to vehicular traffic, but it's our intention to keep it open to pedestrians, albeit fenced for health and safety reasons. Dorset Council Coastal Engineers will keep in contact with local residents and business owners that may be affected by the investigation work, and will keep them informed of the overall project as it progresses. The investigation work is necessary to inform repair of the harbour wall that is scheduled to start in autumn 2021. We understand and try to minimise the disruption that necessary repair works such as this can cause. But the repair of the wall will benefit users of Knowth Parade as well as the local residents and businesses along it. Previous harbour wall repair works have provided compensation where loss of business as a result of the work is robustly proven. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Denise, I believe we have another question.
Yes, a question from Lyle Stantiford. Most of the commercial pontoons in Weymouth Harbour have no shore power, lighting, and in some cases, potable water. The commercial pontoons are used year-round and generate a healthy profit for the harbour. All of the visitor pontoons have these basic facilities, despite making a loss and being used for the summer months only. As a matter of health and safety, can a sum be set aside from the 2020 harbour surplus with immediate effect to install shore power lighting and potable water to all the commercial pontoons in Weymouth Harbour that are lacking these basic facilities, to ensure the harbour-based workforce can work safely through the winter months and beyond? That concludes the question.
Thank you.
And the response. The Weymouth Harbour Master and Harbours Committee are keen to make these types of improvements to harbour facilities. Unfortunately, costs are somewhat prohibitive. For example, recent cost estimates to provide lighting and power to all commercial berths are around £160,000. The most significant cost being attributed to the utility supply itself. However, that's not to say that a programme of improvements over a few years couldn't happen. The Harbour Master has recently applied for an EMFF funding to start this work along a commercial road, and it's hoped that this funding application will be successful. Unfortunately, there is no harbour surplus. In recent years, funds have been drawn down from reserves to manage harbour assets where necessary. The new Harbour Master will be reassessing the harbour's asset management plan to determine future priorities, and the new harbour strategy will support the decision-making process in this respect. Thank you.
And I believe there's another question, Denise.
Yes, a question from Bob Summerhays. In view of the increasing number of antisocial behaviour incidents in Weymouth Harbour, can the Harbours Committee commit today to making a full assessment of security arrangements with a view to 1. Increasing surveillance cameras in the harbour, 2. Reinstalling security lighting where appropriate, and 3. Assessing the plausibility of 24-hour manning of the harbour office? That concludes the question.
Thank you.
And the response. As part of the new Weymouth Harbour Master's familiarisation and assessment of current harbour operations, he will be completing a review of the security arrangements, including CCTV and lighting arrangements within the harbour. Then, in consultation with Dorset Marine Policing Unit and Dorset Council Community Safety Team, determine the best use of assets and personnel to address the security concerns of harbour users. This will be complemented by the establishment of the Harbour Watch Group, made up of harbour users and harbour staff, to create effective liaison with both local and marine police, with the remit of working together for a safe harbour. This will be similar to the Poole Harbour Watch Scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Denise, does that complete all the questions?
It does, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I note that we have a request to a question. Councillor Louis O'Leary.
I know I was banging on about this at the last meeting, but you know these changes to the Harbour Consultative Group, they really just don't go far enough, and they're not going to do what they're intended to do. It's not, you know, when I hold a public meeting in my ward, obviously not now, I don't say to residents, well, you know, you all can't come. You know, you've got to pick a representative and there come along and represent you. You have everybody that, you know, has a stake in it to come along. You know, all you need is a town hall, you know, half the time, you know, and I don't know if we have anyone from the Harbour Consultative Group in there, but the question I'd like to ask them is what have they actually achieved in the last 5 years? If anyone can answer that.
I think, Louis, as you are not present always at the Harbours Consultative Group, you're not aware of all the discussions that go on there. And this has been aired very fully by the Consultative Group, who have decided that the present format and the new Harbour Master is the way they would like to proceed at the moment.
But the problem is, though, you know, someone can ask, why has it been decided now by them? Why haven't they decided that they weren't achieving anything last year, the year before? Where were they during the pedestrianisation issue? And where were they over the relocation of boats issue? That had to take a cabinet member to intervene to stop that happening. You know,
Louis, I'm not sure that this is, we're not on the Consultative Committee minutes at the moment. They are coming up.
Well, that's fine. I'll come back to it then.
Perhaps you could come back to that then. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
We have had a very interesting and comprehensive series of questions from the public, and I think we've had some very well thought out answers. So thank you very much to the officers for the time they've invested in those answers, and to all the people who've submitted the questions. It's very helpful to have these, and we would like them to keep coming. So we move to item 5 now, and we welcome Alastair Clark, chairman of the Weymouth Harbour Consultative Group, I think for his final report, because sadly Alastair, well, not sadly for us, but good for him, he's moving on to a slightly different role within his organisation, so he won't be here in Weymouth to present anymore. So we welcome Alastair for his final presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few headlines from the Consultative Group minutes. I think you've already had the minutes in front of you. The main headlines: Jamie Joyce was welcomed as the new Harbour Master, and introductions made by the Consultative Group members. So that was hopefully a nice warm welcome for Jamie, and we wish him all the very best in his new role as Harbour Master in Weymouth. We received a Harbour strategy update from Ken, obviously referencing the questions from the public, and some of the methods for feeding back into the Consultative Group on that project. So that's clear, and we understood that. Consultative Group terms of reference were again discussed in light of the discussions at the last Harbour meeting in September. So some clear actions were coming out of that, and the general feeling was that in light of the new Harbour Master coming into role, then Jamie should be given time to make the right to new connections with the associations around the harbour, and be given time for that, for him to settle into role and have those discussions. So specific actions coming out were the updates to group member details and how they're published on the harbour website. It's been referenced just now, and how they've been updated. The Harbour Master will receive some dates for the next association meetings around the harbour, so Jamie can attend and have those initial discussions and hear the concerns of those groups. There will also be the intention to set up introductory meetings with Harbour Consultative Group representatives and other Harbour users. So that was sort of another action that came out of that, together with a couple of minor points, additional measures for the agenda items for our meetings going straight to the chair. Obviously, it won't be myself anymore, but there'll be it will be organised by the chair themselves and forward on to the committee. And a change of the meeting notes to perhaps better reflect the discussions I had at the meeting rather than a formal report from the Harbour Master being sat in there. On one of the outcomes as well was, I think, to continue to keep the topic of engagement with the consultative group and all the Harbour users a live topic within the discussions at each of our meetings. You know, the intention is to give Jamie the time to start having new discussions with the associations, and then they will come back at the next meeting, review progress, and then revisit the consultative group terms of reference again. So those were the notes from the meeting. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Alastair. Very comprehensive. Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Louis O'Leary.
To the chair of the current chair of the consultative group, how long have you been chairman of the consultative group for?
It's about 5 years.
What has the consultative group achieved in that 5 years?
Chair, I would slightly, it's a difficult question to answer.
I understand it's a difficult question to answer, but what has come out of the consultative group and was born out of a consultative group discussion that was implemented or something, or what, because what I get asked on the Harbour is we need lighting, security, railings, things like that, and that must come to the consultative group, but I never ever seem to have fed back here.
Well, there have been, as you can see in the meeting notes, the discussions that we have on a quarterly basis are like that. There's plenty of questions raised. There are action points taken away by the Harbour Master and taken back to various committees or associations. So there is lots of discussion, and perhaps we are resolving the matters within our group before without going to committee. There are frustrations, and we certainly have heard them over the last 6 months about certain projects and issues around the harbour not reaching the right people. And the question, I think, for the whole group ongoing is, how we structure those methods of communication to make sure that the right questions are asked for the right people. But the consultative group isn't a perfect method for this, but it's a pretty good one, and I think it's worked pretty well over the last decade and a bit that I've been involved with it. There's been a lot of communication to and from the Harbour Authority back to harbour users. Now, the question I suppose ongoing is how we structure that movement, communication up to the Harbours Committee, and that's for yourselves to carry on and discuss ongoing. In answer to your question, there are lots and lots of small things that we have discussed about the harbour area, and ranging from health and safety through to projects on the pontoons, waste management, how antisocial behaviour is dealt with. We have members of the police on most of our meetings, and we discuss these issues. They're raised. So, we have regular discussions, and I think we can't be solving them all, but we do raise them with the Harbour Authority, and they do get logged. So it is working in that sense.
Thank you, Alastair.
Chairman.
Just a moment, please, Louis. I think, Louis, you need to also just bear in mind that this is now Dorset Council. For most of the period you were referring to, it was the Weymouth Harbour Board.
I understand that. Yeah.
It was a predecessor board, and you may want to direct your questions to members of that board who were there then. But I'd like to bring, I think Ken Buchan wanted to come in.
Can I come back after Ken, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Mark, actually, I put my hand up, but Alastair actually covered pretty much what I wanted to say. A lot of the discussion at the consultative group is of an operational operational matters, and it's a sort of direct contact to the harbour master at that group, and often those issues are discussed and resolved at that operational level and do not require to come to the committee for further approval and discussion. A lot of it is of operational nature. So that's really all I wanted to say, just to confirm what Alastair had already said, really.
Thank you for that, Louis.
So, in the last year on the harbour, or the last 18 months, the two big issues, well, there's three big issues, but I'll talk about two of them, was pedestrianisation, and it was the relocation of certain charter boats to the north side of the harbour, down by the quay regeneration area. And on that, it just seemed that the only people in the game were the Working Harbours officers.
Sorry, you broke.
Sorry, I said the only people that seemed to have been in the game during that were the Working Harbours associates, rather than the Consultative group. And what I don't.
I'm sorry, I don't know what your question is.
No, what I don't. What I mean is, well, where was the Consultative group during that? And what I also come on to is, what I've never understood, and it's no disrespect to Alastair, is why someone from Dean and Reddyhoff, who is a competitor of ours, is chair of the Dorset Council Harbour Consultative Group. That's not by any means a personal thing against Alastair. I'd just like to know why that was. And for a long time as well, the previous...
Louis, that's not a question for here. I think you need to have a talk outside the meeting, because obviously you are not clear about the Harbour Consultative Group and its terms of reference. And I think we need to clarify that with you rather than doing it in public, because the members of that group are well established and it's within the terms of references. So I think we've probably aired that. The question of the charter boats was dealt with. Pedestrianisation is not a Harbours Committee decision.
It was made by the chair of the Harbour Committee last year.
I think it was made by the Place Division rather than the chair of the Harbours Committee.
She was at the meeting, and so was Councillor Williams, I believe, as vice chair.
They may have been at the meeting, but the decision...
And they voted.
I think if we can draw a line under that one, and we will have a chat about the terms of reference for the Consultative Committee. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Alastair, and we wish you well as you move into boat folk from Dean and Reddyhoff.
Thank you. Could I just on a personal note thank everybody that has been involved in the harbour and I've worked with over the last 11 years that I've served on the Consultative Group. It's been a pleasure to work with you all, members of the Harbour Consultative Group and the Harbour team as well. Thank you all very much, and I wish you all the very best for the future. Good luck.
And we wish you the same as well, of course.
Thank you.
I noticed Sarah Williams, you'd just like to come in. Sarah.
Yeah, Mark, just as Vice Chair, I was going to talk a bit about pedestrianisation, but I think you summed it up. But I think if Councillor O'Leary wants to learn more, he should talk to the portfolio holder for Harbours, whose decision it was finally.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Thank you. That was as I understood it as well.
She voted for it, I believe.
If you want to ask a question, can you please request it? We now move on to Chairman's report. I've got a few items I'd like to report. I'm delighted to say, setting up the consultative groups in Lyme and West Bay. We have meeting dates. In Lyme, it's 15th of December at 18:30, and for West Bay, it's Tuesday the 19th of January at 18:30, and So all interested parties are very welcome, and we would like to then, or the object will be to set up the groups and for the group to appoint a chair so that we can continue rather along the lines of the Weymouth one. Yesterday, 3 of us interviewed for a new independent member. As you're aware, we just have 3 independent members. There were very high quality of the 3 applicants we interviewed, extremely high quality, and we will inform you in due course of who will be joining the committee as the latest independent member. And as was mentioned about in one of the questions about the strategy, we had a meeting on the 25th of November, an informal meeting that many of you were at, where we looked at various things, including the pricing and charging, but we also looked at setting up a working group to take forward the strategic or the development of the strategic plan for the harbours. 3 elected members and 2 independent members are forming that working group. So that is, we are looking towards the first meeting in January. So that's my verbal update. We now move on to item 7, and this is the Harbour Master updates. The first one from Jamie Joyce, his first update on the Weymouth Harbour report. So over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Chairman, and very good morning to everyone. I'd like to present the Harbour Master's report for Weymouth, which is comprised in part from my predecessor, Keith Howarth, and information from my commencement on the 2nd of November. I'd like to begin with an overview of the Weymouth Harbour statistics. So the number of marina berths let out is 261 in October, and that's characteristic of previous October months. Main reason, the difference between now and summer being 313 in total, is that number of owners choose to remove their vessels in favour of dry docking over the winter period. Moving on to commercial berths, they remain steady, but we have seen a number of inquiries for new berths for next year. Regarding visiting boats, the number of visiting boat nights has dramatically decreased this year due to COVID. This was down to 2 main reasons. Following the first lockdown period, vessels were only allowed alongside a pontoon and were not able to raft together. And during the second lockdown period in November, visitors were prohibited. This also had a direct effect on pilotage, reducing the total number to 0 due to the lack of customers for the larger cruise type vessels. The number of commercial fishing vessels has decreased from 2018, and this is mainly due to 2 vessels which represented a large proportion of visits deciding to take annual berths at Weymouth. And the final statistic is that of the staycation occurrence of this summer, which has led to increased usage of the Slipway and sales of personal watercraft permits during the summer period. However, during the second lockdown period in November, these facilities were restricted to commercial use only and did see the figures drop considerably, both for Slipway and bridge openings. Moving on to staffing. Staffing at Weymouth Harbour has been stable, with fewer visitor numbers in the summer months. The requirement for seasonal staff has been reduced. However, there has been a requirement to cover long-term sickness of full-time members, which will continue into January 2021. And this equates to 1 member of seasonal staff for 2 days per week. Moving to the Port Marine Safety Code. So the first title is Safe and Efficient Port Marine Operations. During the period that I've been here, there's been no further notable incidents or accidents to report during this period. I can report that the former incident management database has been updated and is now available as an Excel document. However, as a team, we have been working hard to improve our incident management, and I can confirm that the Weymouth Harbour website is now able to accommodate a new automated incident management database, which has been designed and is currently under test by the developer. Following this testing, this will be made available on the website and allow users to report incidents, accidents, defects, and any other information 24 hours a day. There has been a dialogue with the HSE with regard to Custom House Key Area, which has been through consultation with ourselves and our Highways Department with regard to the risk of persons falling from the harbour wall. There have been improvements that of the rail removal and levelling off of the pathways and clear indication of the boundaries of this area. This work coincides with the track removal project, and therefore the costs of resurfacing and line painting are included within this project. Moving to open port duty. As previously discussed, a consequence of the restrictions imposed by the government on the 5th of November included no visitors being accepted. However, commercial operators did continue to operate subject to their criteria for essential work. Conservancy of the harbour. A survey of the harbour was conducted on the 20th of November, which provided bathymetric data to establish the current depths of the harbour and relate these to critical positions within the harbour, including the harbour entrance and pontoons. It is anticipated that these results will be available this week, and we'll make this available to all harbour users via the website. Moving to environmental duty. On the 18th of November, the 2P oil spill response course for operators was run at Weymouth in a COVID-friendly environment and included members from the harbour, boatfolk, Weymouth Town Council, beach and parks teams. To complement this, a notification exercise was also completed on Wednesday, the 2nd of December, and currently an audit of all oil response equipment is taking place. And we have reconfirmed the Memorandum of Understanding with Portland to facilitate staff and assets in the event of an oil spill in either harbour. An MCA audit of Weymouth Harbour Waste Management Plan was conducted on Monday the 9th of November and encompassed Boatfolk Marina as well. The audit feedback was very complimentary with the harbour and we met the required standard. To further enhance the waste management plan, consultation has been sent out in the form of questionnaires to the Harbour Consultative Committee and feedback requested from our customers through our enhanced feedback forms, which were discussed in the questions before. Weather, Weymouth has fared well during this period and there's nothing to report with this regard. Moving from the Port Marine Safety Code to Harbour Works, the Weymouth Quay Regeneration Project. So this is the area from number 1 berth to the ferry steps. Works have already commenced with the demolition of the Terminal Ferry Building A and resurfacing the area of car parking and repair of Wall D, being the ferry steps. And we are currently preparing for the next stage of demolition, which will be Building B, the former Departures Lounge. The harbour walls will be covered in an engineering report later on. Moving to the RLI Weymouth Inshore lifeboat. The RLI are expecting delivery of a larger inshore lifeboat, an Atlantic 85, in January 2021. The existing RLI boathouse required modifications to accommodate the larger boat, and works commenced on this on the 9th of November to extend this facility by approximately 1 metre. These works are now complete, and it is expected that delivery and crew training on the new lifeboat will commence on the 11th of January 2021. Moving on to a new project, which is the Weymouth Sailing Club. Weymouth Sailing Club have a self-funded proposal to improve the use of the waterfront in front of their sailing club. And this is due to the current piles reaching the end of their working life, being 25 years old. Ideally, this project will commence in spring 2021, subject to approvals, and will take approximately 2 weeks to complete and have a working life of another 25 years. The Sailing Club are working with Walcombe Marine to submit method and impact statements to the MMO and Environmental Agency for them to review and grant licenses from this project. From an operational point of view, this project to replace the infrastructure will be kept within the original footprint of the current location and will ensure access for the rowing ferry and lifeboat facility. These works will represent significant enhancement and improvement to the safe access to this facility. The Harbour Revision Order, the latest estimate for approval is the 21st of January 2021, although this is subject to change due to COVID or Brexit. If this were to go ahead, the HRO would take approximately 1 month later to come into force, and at this time work will commence on defining the general directions for Weymouth. Maritime and local events. Unfortunately, most of the events for this year were cancelled due to COVID restrictions, and this does include the Christmas Day Harbour Swim. Thank you, and that concludes the Harbour Master Report from Weymouth.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I would like to just, Jamie touched on it, I congratulate him on his agreement with the Harbour Master at Portland, Mike Shipley, on the Memorandum of Understanding relating to an oil spill incident, and the agreement will provide vessels, personnel, oil response equipment to each other in the event of an oil spill. And it will be a much more dynamic and swifter response by Tier 1 responders. So I think this memorandum will be signed shortly. So I think that's a very worthwhile, and congratulate you for that, Jamie. And also I am aware that Jamie is in discussions, and we wait to see what happens about a possible collaboration on pilotage, which could have significant implications, positive implications for Weymouth, but it's very early days and we will report to the committee as that progresses. Are there any questions to Jamie on the Weymouth Harbour report? I note that Councillor O'Leary has said very good. Thank you for that. Okay, if there's I can't see any questions. We now move on to the Bridport, that's West Bay, of course, and Lyme Regis Harbours report. So we welcome James Radcliffe.
Hi, good morning. So the statistics for up until the end of October for Bridport, our season tickets have remained lower compared to normal years. This is due to the shortened season and COVID. But with our season tickets being down, the day launches have actually increased. So fewer people are buying season tickets, but there's more actually launching. Visitors boats and nights have reduced. Again, during the COVID situation, we were closed for most of it. The shop and mechanical repairs have reduced. The shop remained closed during the first COVID incident, and so public weren't allowed in, so the sales have reflected that. The diving air station is lower than this time last year, with the recreational divers being massively reduced and very few clubs actually using the harbour this year. What has kept it high is the increase on commercial scallopers. They've increased this year with more divers using Lyme Regis and bringing their air bottles over to Bridport. Private and commercial moorings remain at capacity, with a waiting list that should be able to replenish them should anybody drop out. So the stats for Lyme, the season tickets have increased. This is down to a better understanding of harbour fees and an increase in staffing hours. The boat lifter remains well used, but predicted to be slightly lower than last year, with not all mooring holders returning to the harbour. The Keysight Parking has increased, and this is an area where we, on the Slipway, we use for parking harbour users' vehicles. This helps the harbour user use the harbour more efficiently, and it's been well taken up. The private moorings have increased compared to last year, but there is still a reasonable amount of vacancy at Lyme. There is the waiting list mainly consist of vessels that aren't appropriate for the moorings that are available. People seem to be wanting larger moorings, and the moorings available are for sort of 5-metre boats. Commercial moorings remain at capacity. The staffing, again, is worked well, with staff working across both harbours. All our seasonal staff have now finished for the year and relieved the 2 assistant harbour masters working together to work across both harbours on a winter maintenance programme. The Harbour Works, the Fishermen's and Harbour Masters store, the planning permission has been approved, the finances agreed. Detailed plans are now being drawn up with a hope to start the build in the new year, ready for a March completion. This will, and we're working with the Blue Marine Foundation to assist the fishermen to use part of that building for a chiller and cold room and ice machine. The Slipway extension and repairs and modifications, the planning application was approved last week by Dorset Council, and the MMO application has been submitted, but we're still waiting for a response on that. We're expecting that to be back sometime in January. Our in-house teams are working on plans, detailed plans for that. So as soon as we get the permission from the MMO, we're in a position where we can start work straight away. The office at Lyme Regis, we have a planning application in to use part of it as retail, the same as we do at Bridport, and we hope to offer similar chandlery items that we do at Bridport in Lyme Regis. So on Bridport, the timber piles, last year we did a large section of the West Basin and part of the East Quay Wall, and this year, in the new year, we're planning on doing the 2nd phase on the East Basin of the harbour. The Divers Air Station at Bridport, planning permission was granted earlier this year for a new permanent building, and the plans are being drawn up for so we can get some funding. Currently, we have no funding to build the store, but we're working on different options to see what we can do. And our events, majority of our events this year were all cancelled, except with the powerboat racing, which managed to go ahead in between the 2 lockdowns, and the Boxing Day swim at Bridport and the New Year's Day swim at Lyme have both been cancelled also. That's it from Bridport and Lyme.
Thank you very much, James. Have we got any questions to James about his report? Yes, I think, Lee, you would like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's slightly broader than just a Bridport and Lyme, but with that really good news story that we heard about Weymouth of the MOU that's being established about oil spills with Portland. Given that that's a good news thing, and I don't know the detail of it, but I'm guessing it's about mutual assistance. Would there be any value in having a common protocol across all of the Dorset harbours and winding perhaps Lyme and Bridport into that agreement, not necessarily immediately, but in the fullness of time, so that we have a common protocol across the Dorset harbours?
Yes.
Jamie, could you give a view on that one, please?
Yeah, certainly. James and I have actually been working quite closely over the past month to bring all of these oil spill swapping of staff. So over the next coming months, we will start having some memorandums of understanding between each of our harbours and a common approach to all of these incidents and help each other out.
Yeah, thanks very much. And you could argue that it extends as far as Poole, Christchurch, if in the fullness of time, a common approach to to disaster.
Definitely.
Thank you. That a very valid point, Lee, and I'm glad we're working towards that. Thank you very much. Any other points? Okay, we now move on to thanks to both Harbour Masters and particularly for Jamie for his first report. We now move on to Matthew Penny to present the engineering update. Item 8, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the engineering report is to give an engineering update to the committee for all 3 harbours. If I start at Lyme, dredging inspections for this year have been completed. No significant concerns were raised during the inspections. However, it has been noted since then that surfacing problems have arisen and repairs are required, and so we're monitoring that situation and anticipate that we will have to carry out some patch repairs to the surface over the coming months, weather permitting. In the medium to long term, of course, we've got the Lyme Regis Environmental Improvement Scheme Phase 5, the Phase 5 of that scheme, which is the COB, and that has recently restarted again. We've re-engaged with consulting engineers who were working with previously and are now taking that forward. Work in the medium term is to look at design elements to ensure that they have a fresh look at them to make sure that they do meet the objectives of the scheme, and start engaging with obviously stakeholders such as James the Harbour Master, and then also looking to progress a business case, flood defence grant, and a business case, which we hope to submit March or April this year. In the report, you can see the key milestones, most significant of which is the proposed construction start date of autumn 2022. That's obviously dependent upon permits, licenses, consents being approved, as well as the overall business case with DEFRA being approved as well. So a few ifs there, but that's our intention at the moment. Moving on to West Bay, say dredging and inspections have also been completed. No significant concerns raised again. However, we are working with local consultants to investigate problems around the walkways and walls on the Eastern Basin. Some voids and settlements been observed, so we're taking a look at that with a view to potential remedial works taking place, but we're just in the investigation phase at the moment for that. In Weymouth, inspections here were slightly delayed. They should be completed this week. If they haven't already been, I'll have to catch up with my colleague who was carrying that out. He gave me a completion date of early December for those. Respective schemes we have going on or recently completed around the harbour. Weymouth, the Harbour Wall D, the strengthening works at the eastern end, the Custom House Quay. We've still got some very minor defects remaining on that, and the lighting to the ferry steps still outstanding, but we're working to get those complete and the contract completed next year. Harbour Wall C, which is along North Parade and was mentioned in the submitted questions by members of the public. We are due to we're carrying out site investigation works early next year, and then we'll undergo a period of designing and stakeholder engagement. The consents and licenses, which I've mentioned previously for Lyme, it will have to undergo as well, with a view to starting construction in October next year. I've been asked a question, and I've been asked to give a verbal update regarding the budgets for Walls D and C. Their combined budget that was approved by Weymouth and Portland Borough back in 2015, the majority of the monies has been spent towards Wall D. We are forecasting to have approximately 600,000 remaining for Wall C. Now, we do not believe at this point that that'll be enough for the replacement of that wall. So our approach currently is to undertake a repair, which will extend its life expectancy. And then the committee may remember that the Weymouth Harbour and Esplanade Flood and Coastal Risk Management Scheme strategy was recently approved by Cabinet. with a view to developing a scheme, a comprehensive scheme for the harbour and Esplanade. We're hoping that if we extend the life of that wall, then the replacement of it can be undertaken during that scheme construction. The benefit of that, the main benefit of that, of course, is that will be externally funded to a large part, not fully, but largely funded. So there'll be less there'll be less burden upon council reserves as that. So we think it's an appropriate strategy going forward to maximise the life expectancy of Wall C at that point. If I move on to Harbour Wall C and 9, which are on the peninsula, as part of the Weymouth Quay regeneration scheme, we're undertaking some repairs to that. Site investigation works are ongoing at this current time. They started on Monday, and we'll be engaging with the local stakeholders. That's ongoing with a view to design period early next year. And then construction will be tied in with the larger Weymouth Quay regeneration scheme. So there'll be one contractor working on the Weymouth regeneration scheme and the harbour wall repairs 3 and 9. We're also monitoring walls F and G. That'll be an ongoing process that we'll probably carry out until those walls are finally replaced. They're showing signs of their age. They do have some defects. There is some movement taking place. We are monitoring that, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much, Matt. May I just draw, I think it's probably just a slight typo on page 41 under Wall C. You've got trail pits. I'm sure it should be trial pits.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, apologies. So my apologies for
no,
that.
Don't worry. I think before they go out as correct report, we probably ought to just amend that. Are there any questions to Matt about that very detailed engineering report? It's quite a relief to know so much is happening. There is a recommendation that we note this report. So can I please have members' agreement that we note this report? Well, if there's anyone who dissents from noting it, can they let me know? Otherwise, I'll take it that we all agree to note the report.
Agreed.
I think everyone's happy with that. Good. We now move on to item 9. This is the Harbour's budget monitoring, and our first one will be Weymouth Harbour budget, and Claire Connolly is going to present that. So over to you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning again, everyone. So the budget monitoring for this financial year at Appendix 1B is listed everything against its different categories. The budget for 2021 was approved with the knowledge that we would need to take £239,000 from the reserves to be able to balance the budget. Obviously, that financial situation worsened due to COVID, and our current expectation is that income will be down by £113,000. The sort of detail of that is shown at paragraph 2.1, but it is largely due to not being able to have visiting leisure vessels for the first part of the season, and then obviously significantly reduced numbers for the whole of the summer. You know, fortunately, there have been some areas of income that were unaffected, and in some places busier than normal. You know, all of that is sort of also reflected in the stats that Jamie presented earlier on. So our income from Slipway is up, issuing permits for PWCs is up, and you know, pleasing to note that the numbers for our annual moorings is also up compared to last year. So we've obviously looked at some savings. There's been some small savings made, but you know, not enough to offset the loss of income. So we've had to revisit the asset plan. Initially, we're proposing to defer a number of high value projects. They total £243,000. The projects are listed on your Appendix 1C in Tables 3. The intention is just to, for now, defer them for 1 year, which will then place the harbour budget in a favourable position at year end. We obviously realise it's a short-term fix, but each year the asset plan is a fairly ambitious programme of works because we are playing catch-up. But in reality, this actually challenges us each year anyway, and so our plan over the next few months is to carry out a full review of that asset plan. You know, what we have, what we use it for, what's the current life expectancy, and then we hope to be able to sort of plan for a more realistic annual programme of works each year. So with those changes, and if they go ahead, then the current position is that we would expect to return a surplus at the year end of £154,000, and that would be then transferred into our reserves. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor, that's very comprehensive, Claire. Thank you very much. David Gray would like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to get up the actual page. On page 51.4.4, it talks about, it gives the future spend asset management improvement plan. And I just have a question really about 24-25. I mean, there's a massive need for, I'm just worried a little bit about that investment profile really. So we get to the end of, or 23-24, I think there's 114,000, and then it suddenly jumps. I'd just like a bit of explanation as to why it's pushed out that far and why it's got that sort of profile, because it looks unusual.
Yeah, are you looking at the chart in 4.4?
Yes.
Yeah, so the jump in 24-25 is that within our plan, that would be the year that the inner harbour pontoon berths would need to be replaced or to be considered. So that's, again, one of the things with Jamie in post now that we're going to look at. We're going to, you know, the intention would be to get some other people's advice to, you know, to look at its current life expectancy. But that the reason why that jump is due to the replacement of that asset.
And is there a reserve set up to start to build towards that already, a specific reserve?
No, the only reserve that we have is the reserve that is shown on Appendix 1B. Yes. So yeah, the balance of that, yeah, that's the reserve that we have.
It's just unusual. It's just unusual that we know that, well, we think we're going to replace that as a key asset, but we've not got a specific reserve set up for it to build up to. It just looks unusual. You know, it might come as a surprise to us when we have to invest £750,000.
Jamie, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just coming back on that point, that's a really good point. And both Claire and I have just had a discussion about that in the last couple of weeks, that we are going to actually reset the asset management plan to look at these bigger projects and have them in a separate ring-fenced area. So it's just bear with us because it's in its infancy at the moment, but next time it should reflect nicely in the asset management plan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Jamie.
I think that's a very extremely valuable point, David, and I'm glad it's being attended to. My question to Claire was that the deferment of on the asset register, we're quite confident that doesn't really compromise any safety issues. I imagine that's bound to be the case, but I'd like your confirmation, please.
Yeah, I mean, that is the case. You know, if there was a change of plan and we suddenly felt that something needed to be done, then we would need to draw that back from the reserves between now and such time that anything needed to change. But, you know, the table, you know, the biggest key items in there are the replacement of the pilot boat, which isn't considered to be a risk if we don't do that. So, yeah, we feel confident about that plan.
Yes, I think you've had a recent inspection to be able to extend its life a little, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's
on
correct.
seaworthiness. So yes,
yeah.
Thank you for that confirmation.
Okay.
I don't think there's any further questions for Claire. So can we move over now to the Bridport one and James, please?
Yep. So the Bridport budget monitoring. So for Bridport, we're predicting a 44,000 overspend. And the prediction for the harbour reserves is going to be 50k. So that's made up of the employees. We're predicting a favourable and this is because the harbour master position has been shared between the two harbours. Our premises costs have gone up. It's so it predicted an adverse cost. There's contract cleaning and the Crown Estate rent have gone up. Our transport cost, currently we've got the cost of fuel for lime in our transport cost, so that will be shared with lime, so that will reduce. And our supplies and services, the outer harbour is no longer currently funded by the Environment Agency to be dredged. So this was, we had some money this year from central contingency funds, but the wasn't enough to cover the whole cost. Our income is predicted to be adverse, and this is due to COVID. So we're predicting a 21,000 adverse amount there. And as was mentioned, the reserve fund, we're moving the 25k to reserves for the inner harbour dredging. That's Bridport. Did you want a question on Bridport for Lime? Or?
Are there any particular questions for Bridport, or should no, James? If you go ahead and do Lime, and then we'll see if there's any general questions. Thank you. Okay. So for Lyme Regis, we're predicting a favourable year end, and so this is made up with the employees with adverse at the moment, but there is some cost to come across from Bridport. This written the wrong way around on here, but it's the costs need to come from Bridport back to Lyme, because where we've shared staff across the two harbours. But with the transport, as mentioned in Bridport's, the favourable amount will reduce because of the fuel cost. Supplies and services is showing an adverse, and this is mainly for the cost of the designated person from Marico Marine. And then our income is showing as favourable. There's a lot of harbour dues that have been charged this year, and more understanding to the charges that have contributed towards that. Also, there's been a big increase in commercial fishing vessels staying at the harbour, so that's shown a big increase and contributed over 12k to the income. There won't be any movement to reserves this year because the money has been used for the dredging of the pontoon and entrance to the harbour. That's it from Lyme Regis. Thank you very much. Just a comment, I've had one or two of the users comment to me about the commercial vessels coming in from ports like Mevagissey, but of course we are an open port, and that is part of being an open port, is that we welcome commercial vessels wherever they're from. It's not restricted to local vessels, and I've also had questions about why are they allowed to fish in their bay, but of course the sea is open to everybody. That might change with Brexit, of course, but we will wait and see. I don't think we're dealing with that issue today. Are there any other points about James's two reports? Thank you very much, James. And I think it's appropriate. It's 11:25. I think we've possibly got quite a comprehensive next item 10. So I think probably, can we have a 5-minute break and return at just before past? We'll have a comfort break now, and if everyone can be back in 5 minutes, because the next item may take a little time. Thank you. we move on now to item 10, the Harbour's budget and fees and charges. And there are a lot of recommendations here, but firstly we'll go through the Weymouth Harbour ones, and Claire and Jamie are going to jointly or each present little bits of this. So please, I think, is it Claire first?
Yep, that's right, Chair. So I'm going to just, it's quite a brief run through of the budget, and then Jamie is going to talk through the fees and charges. So the 21-22 budget has been set pretty much based on operational status quo, and assuming that things will be much the same as they are this year. And we have applied price increases as recommended as part of the fees and charges recommendations within the report. There are some sort of risks and opportunities that we haven't been able to include. So these are listed at 7.1. So we haven't included anything that might come out of the harbour strategy. We haven't included any income or costs associated with the Keysight regeneration project. And we haven't included anything related to the areas defined by the harbour revision order. You know, these are mostly unknown at the moment or being worked on. So from this point of view, we haven't included them at this point in time. So in Appendix 1, there is a summary of how the budget looks for next year. Obviously, again, we are looking at taking a sum of money from our reserves to balance the budget, which is not sustainable for the future. So we come back to our asset plan, and obviously that the review of that is going to be fundamental in addressing next year's budget gap and hopefully anything in the future. You know, there isn't an intention to take a risks with our assets. But we'd like the opportunity to have a fresh look at it. As Jamie mentioned earlier, maybe consider doing it in a slightly different way. We would also like to engage with other experts and help us put together a plan that's robust and achievable for the future. The plan currently on Appendix 2 includes the items deferred from this current year, moved over into next financial year as potential spends. And as you can see, it's a fairly significant expense next year overall. So the asset plan is totaling £487,000, which will be part of our review over the next few months. So that's my points on the budget. I don't know if Jamie would like to do the fees and charges, or if you want me to do some questions first.
Let's see if there are any questions on the budget while it's fresh. I can't see anybody, so thank you, Claire. Perhaps Jamie, if you can go on to the fees and charges, please.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation for the 2021-2022 fees and charges is for a 3% increase on the majority of prices. That's to encompass the rise in service costs and to ensure a continuous improvement in facilities. It is of note that Weymouth Harbour fees are still competitively low, and they do offer good, valuable, flexible berthing packages. But we do need to bear in mind, in general, our infrastructure and facilities do require that investment. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jamie. The table's there with the proposed changes of a 3% all round. We were looking at various options on the informal day, and these have now taken account of some of the concerns on that informal day, and I think you did a little more benchmarking on the commercial side particularly, and we have a revised figure for approval today. David, you wanted to have a word. Councillor David Gray.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Mark. It's just going back to Claire's introduction on 7.1. I'm just looking for a little bit of colouring in, really, in terms of things that have not been included in the budget, which seems very prudent to me. But I'm a little bit confused about the second point, Keysight regeneration project, how that will impact. Could you give us, Claire, could you just, because obviously the Centre of Excellence is moving away from the harbour, so that's not going to impact it. What might or could impact the sort of the finances in terms of either income or cost of that middle point? I understand it's not been included, but I'm struggling to understand what it might affect. I mean, that may be a bit naive of me, but
no. So, for example, something we discussed the other day within the office is the fish landing quay that will be relocated, and then it might be the case of having to tidy up the current fish landing quay, because I'm not sure that that's included in the scheme. So there's that is one of the projects. I think there's a lot of unknowns, to be honest.
Yeah, I understand that, Claire. I understand that. I was sort of going down the route of would the part of the regeneration mean that the fees would be greater? I understand the remedial work of moving something like the fish landing, but is that more of an opportunity rather than a cost? Is what I'm trying to sort of where I was going with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, does Jamie want to come in? He's got his hand up. I can let him if he's got something he wants to add first.
Yes, Jamie.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity both ways. Firstly, when we're looking at repairing the harbour wall, obviously we've got to take the vessels that are currently berthed off of that location. So we may lose some income in that area if we can't relocate them. Obviously, we're going to try our hardest to relocate those vessels. And the second point is, once the quayside regeneration there is going to be increased capacity to fit visiting vessels and various other vessels in that area that wouldn't have fitted in as it stands at the moment.
Right, that was what I was looking for. So it's capacity which will drive more revenue. Yeah. Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, so very good point. Thanks, David. Any excuse me. Any other points on the Weymouth on the overall 3% increase? There is a lot more detail behind that in your pack, but I think we've arrived at a very sensible way forward this year, taking into account all the reservations, particularly about the commercial side. So I think we've come up with a very pragmatic scheme here that I hope will meet your approval. Thank you for introducing it. Okay, we'll move on to Lyme. Well, Bridport first with James, and then Lyme also with James, please.
So the requirements for the Bridport budget for 21-22, the inflationary increases have been applied across all the budget lines. Our services budget has been increased to cover the outer harbour dredging cost, as we still require the 25k to go to reserves each year for the inner harbour. And the premises budget has been increased to cover the Crown Estate and the premises cleaning cost. So that's the Bridport one. And the Lyme, again, the inflationary increases have been applied. The supplies and services budget has been increased to cover the additional dredging cost from 25 to 35k. And the premises budget has also been increased to cover Crown Estate increases and cleaning cost. That's really it for the two budgets. Do you want me to move on to the dues?
If there are no questions about the budgets, yes, we'll go on to the proposals for the dues in both harbours, because I think we're treating both the same, aren't we?
Lyme and Bridport, yeah.
Yes.
This is for both Lyme and Bridport. So the recommendations for 21-22 is to increase the fees on private leisure by 3% across the board. And the proposal for commercial, as reported at last year's budget setting, commercial fees have dropped massively below the private leisure fees. So the proposal is to increase their fees this year by 10%. Hopefully, and it's bringing them back up in line with private leisure. Currently, commercial have a 50% discount compared to private leisure, but their fees currently even fall below that at the moment. So the intention is to increase them by 10%. Also on our dues and charges sheets, we want to introduce storage fees for the sailing club. Currently, there's no actual set fees on our dues and charges, so that would be to introduce a new fee for that £110 per boat, and then also introduce a discount scheme similar to what they do in Weymouth of 20% for clubs and charities. So this will be on our launching fees and storage fees and season ticket fees, and also to introduce the launching fees for the sailing club. And that's all covered on the dues and charges then.
So, do we have any questions about this? I know we did look at it in some detail at the informal day on the 25th, and although we were, I know, trying to standardise charges over all the harbour or increases, it was felt that it wasn't really possible. We needed to treat Weymouth differently, partly because the commercial vessels pay for 12 months there, but in fact, with the 50% discount at Lyme and Bridport is in effect only a 6-month charge, isn't it, James?
Yes.
And that's why we felt we could have the differential for commercial there, but not at Weymouth. Are there any points or questions about this? Because there will be a recommendation for this. If not, how would members of the committee like to deal with the recommendations? Because these have to go to full council, of course. It's our recommendation from the Harbours Committee. They don't go to Cabinet for further discussion, but they will go to full Cabinet, I think, in February. And we have 6 recommendations there. Would members like to do them en bloc, or do we see any necessity to do any of them individually? I'm going to be guided by your views, please.
En bloc for me, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any
En bloc for me, Chairman. I'm happy to do this en bloc.
En bloc, Chairman.
Thank you. Would anybody defer or not wish to do them en bloc?
Happy to do them en bloc and happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. Was that Sarah?
Yeah.
May we have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair. That's Councillor Rob Hughes to second.
Oh, okay. I think as it's a big recommendation, we'll do a roll call to support or not, or abstain. So I'm going to support. Rob Hughes.
Yes, I would second this proposal, Chair.
Thank you. Louis O'Leary.
4, Chairman.
Thank you. Mary Penfold.
4.
Thank you. Sarah, you've proposed. So David.
4.
And Steve Pittman.
Yes, support.
And
just
Lee Hardy.
I'll support, Chair.
Sorry?
And Lee Hardy 4.
Thank you very much. So that's unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you all very much. And we now move on to item 11, the forward plan for the Harbours Committee, and that is going to be presented by Ken Buchan. So over to Ken.
Yes, Chair. Really, just to note the forward plan for the next meeting, as Claire alluded to. We should have some clarification around about the HRO and the additional income to Weymouth Harbour at that point in time, in which case we'll report about the future finances and the difference that makes to the finances for Weymouth Harbour. We would look to have a early draft of the harbour strategy coming in March also. This will be somewhat dependent on consultation that happens between now and then, and the arrangement of those meetings with harbour users and the working group of the committee and the consultative group. And then there will be an update from William Heaps, our designated person, who will give us this annual report for the Port Marine Safety Code. That will also be happening at the March meeting. And then I think that we have then goes in towards June 2021 for the financial outturn for this financial year. So that's it really, Chairman.
Thank you. On the Port Marine Safety Code, I notice it still has Keith Howarth's name on that. So could we please? Yes. I'm really just trying to show you that I've read it all.
Yes, but that will be updated.
Are there any questions on the forward plan?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, David.
Well, yes, it's sort of going back to my previous point that Jamie and Claire talked about and my unease at the medium-term financial investment 24-25. Can we have a standing order or some sort of comeback from Jamie and Claire as the review of that in terms of the assets and the effects that might have going forward as a specific item, because it might inform the future budgeting, I guess, as well. So sometime next year, maybe.
Yes, I think that's a very good suggestion, and we will get something together for that meeting and look to. It would always be part of the budget monitoring update anyway, but there is a substantial piece of work to be done between Jamie and Claire, in the next few months to understand what the current asset management plan is, what future needs are, and so on. So yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion, and we'll bring that back to the next committee.
Yeah, my concern, Ken, is that of course when you leave this sort of investment plan within the sort of budgeting process, it sometimes gets lost because everybody's focused on the here and now. And as an asset plan and a medium-term financial plan, I think we should take that as a separate item in or at least both instances included and as a separate item.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. Thanks, David. I think also we are going to see a certain amount of flux in the budgeting depending on the HROs, because there could be some significant changes that will evolve if they go through the appropriate passages and come into place. But I think we may well have something more about that at the next meeting, because hopefully they'll be in place and we'll have a little more detail on the effects on both the budgets and the assets. Right, thank you very much for that, Ken. Item 12 is urgent business. Denise, I don't believe we have any urgent business, do we?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. We move on to item 13, and this has been moved to the end of the agenda because if we wish to have any discussions about any financial implications of this, we would have to move into an exempt format, just the officers and committee members, and return to the full meeting after that. So all of you will have seen some detail in your papers, but please just be a little circumspect in not mentioning any figures in general discussion, but we would need to move into exempt to have that discussion if it's necessary. It possibly isn't necessary. So Jamie, please, can you introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the introduction of the renewal of Weymouth Gig Rowing Club lease. The Gig Rowing Club continued to be an important part of the harbour, and with an active membership. Operationally, there have been good relationships between the Harbour Authority and other users, particularly in refining water access to slipway and pontoons, and has definitely increased the safety within that particular area. And we're talking about the facilities including the clubhouse and the boat shed on the south shore of the harbour on North Parade that is under the jurisdiction of the statutory Harbour Authority. The land is not required for any other harbour use, and therefore a renewal of a lease for an interim period of 3 years is a temporary recommendation until a longer lease can be considered following the approval of the Harbour Revision Order. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points on this? And as Jamie said, we're looking for a short-term renewal because until we have the Harbour Revision Order through Parliament, we cannot grant the longer one. So this is a temporary measure to tide us and the Gig Rowing Club over until the Harbour Revision Order is approved. Are there any points on this that don't include anything to do with the financial matters?
I'm happy to accept this temporary lease, Chair, for 3 years until Harbour Revision is sorted.
Councillor Sarah Williams, did you have a point on this, or?
Chair, I've reread it and I'm now happy.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We have, if there's no other points on this, we have 3 recommendations again that will go to full council. The recommendation 1 is an interim period. Recommendation 2, that we're given delegated authority to determine further interim renewals if necessary, which would be if there was a delay to the Harbour Revision Order, and to recommend that the harbours be given delegated authority to then determine whether to grant a full lease for the period of 25 years from the meeting in March once the Harbour Revision Order has been approved, or if and when it's approved. So are we happy to take all those 3 recommendations together?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
I don't think there's anyone dissenting from that. So may I have a proposer and seconder, please?
I'm happy to propose that we accept this, Chair.
Thank you, Rob.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Sarah. Is everybody in favour? If I better do the roll call again because it's a recommendation to council. I'm in favour, and Rob, as you're proposing, I guess you are. Councillor O'Leary?
Yes, Chairman, in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Penfold?
In favour, Chairman.
And Councillor Sarah Williams, I guess, as you seconded, you are in favour.
Yes.
Councillor David Gray?
In favour.
And our independent members, Steve Pittman?
Yes, in favour.
Thank you. And Lee Hardy?
In favour.
Thank you. That's unanimous again. So those recommendations, all 3 will go to full council, which I think is in February. I think that now concludes all our business today, unless anyone's got any other observations or points they want to make. But thank you all. Sorry?
Yes, Chair. Sorry. I've got a couple of questions, 1 question and 1 suggestion, if I may.
Of course, please.
I'm sorry I didn't ask these at the opening. My quick question is, and this is probably my naivety again, are there any implications for December the 31st with the B word looming large as a trade? Are there any sort of contingencies or specifics to the harbour that we might should or could be aware of? I don't know is the answer.
No, I think one of the other committees I serve on, which is the Southern IFCA, which issues license but also patrols, there are massive implications because their range will extend possibly from 6 miles to 12 miles. But Jamie, can you come in on any direct implications for the harbour?
Yeah, for our recreational users, we've actually got a pro forma because they've all been asked to actually prove where they're going to be at 2300 hours on the 31st. So we've got a pro forma that we can give to our recreational users to prove that they're actually in there, and that relates to VAT and future sale of those vessels. And as the chair explained as well, there is going to be implications for the fishing industry. We are awaiting for departments to come back to us and tell us exactly what those are, and we'll relay those to you as soon as we have them.
Brilliant, thank you. And Chair, my second question is really a suggestion, and I don't want to tread on anybody's toes with the consultative group, but I do feel it's a little bit of an elephant in the room as my sort of newbie observation. But with the new chair, I guess, going to be elected for the consultative group, I have some sympathy, partial sympathy with Councillor O'Leary's view around it is a consultative group, but it would be really useful if they kept a running total or a running dialogue of the things that they've pushed up to us as a committee, because as a committee, because we like to be scrutinised by a consultative group and like some of their suggestions and wider knowledge. So it would be really useful if on the agenda we could, either our agenda or theirs, that we could have some sort of running list of issues, because it feels like they're operating at an operational level, and the users would like some answers to some of the questions. And I think it would be good of us to have a running, so that it avoids the question that Councillor Leary asked, which was, what have they done in the last 5 years? And we can point to this document to say, these are the issues that we've discussed. We don't always accept them, but at least we have duty bound to discuss them. So both us and them, really. That was my suggestion.
I think that's a very interesting and valid point, David. I think Louis would like to come in on this, and then Councillor Sarah Williams.
My thing is only very briefly. I think what's an interesting suggestion would be as well is if we start describing harbour users as customers, because they do pay to use our harbour and they do pay for our facilities, and I think it's a far better term to use than user, because they do, you know, they don't use it for nothing. They do pay to use it. So I think it's a far more friendlier term and shows a bit more respect. That's just a suggestion.
I think that's a suggestion we can add or put as a forward to the Consultative Committee. But it has been sort of practice has been that they are users of the harbour, and I think in the old days customers would have included all the passengers on ferries, and that is a distinction we don't have at the moment, but could have again in the future. So it's something we can think about, Louis. Thank you for that. Sarah, yes.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think that's a very good suggestion from David. Could it be also extended to across to West Bay and Lyme Regis consultative groups?
Yes, I think that's. I think we're aiming, Sarah, to standardise the way that all three consultative groups work. So I think each one would, the chair of each one would bring the minutes to our meeting. So in future, hopefully we will have 3 chairs presenting 3 sets of minutes, and we should be able to, as David says, track that. And yes, I agree. Councillor Lacey Clark has made an observation, and I think that's to do with the users and customers, and it's probably something that we don't need to discuss here and now. Thank you for that.
Chair, Karen has a hand up.
Sorry, yes, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back in relation to the port health requirements for EU exit, just so that members are aware. We do have to issue new export health certificates, and there are members of the Food Safety and Port Health team in my area who will be undertaking inspections, both, and this really is for those exporting fish and shellfish, and we have 2 qualifying businesses in the Weymouth and Portland area, but they are supplied by fishing vessels, and all the fishing vessels have to be registered and inspected in preparation for EU exit. I think the team have done about 60 to 70% of those inspections, but they will all be complete by the end of December, just so that you're aware of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, and I think some of these additional burdens on your team are items that we kind of assumed a smooth passage, but there's an awful lot, and I'm glad we're on top of it, and we will all be compliant by December the 31st. So thank you for making sure that we will be.
Chair, if you see that Lee has his hand up.
No, Lee, please.
Thank you, Chair. This may have been overtaken by events. I raised it with you a few weeks ago, but when we had our informal meeting, we had a presentation from the team doing the strategy work. Very good presentation. one of the things they highlighted from their consultations with the public, whether there were concerns, and I'm quoting what was said rather than what might be the case, there were concerns raised over safety in at least 2 of the harbours. I suspect they are pretty small things, but I don't know that for certain. This committee, as the duty holder, are we obliged to bottom that out? I make it very clear, I have no doubt that the harbour masters in both areas are entirely on top of it, but I think it might be worthwhile us just closing that loop so that we have fulfilled the duty holders' responsibilities.
Thank you. A very, very cogent observation, Lee. I have had discussions with, because the 2 harbours mentioned were Lyme and West Bay, and I've had discussion with James. James, would you like to just come back on this? Because I think it was particularly pertinent to the Slipway, wasn't it?
Yeah, the main points that were raised was the state of the Slipway at Lyme Regis. So the edge, as the harbour bed's dropped, and it's created a big drop. But we've already addressing it. So with the scheme that we're doing next year, should by extending the Slipway and then raising a section of it, we'll take all of that out. There was, I think, safety was also mentioned regarding staff, and I think really with the income that we've shown at Lyme, the staffing levels have probably increased more than decreased. I think previously there was a lot of volunteers running around, maybe made it look like there was a lot of staff around, but the harbours have been well staffed and the issues are being addressed that were raised on those reports.
Thank you. And West Bay was mentioned or in it, but we weren't sure whether that was people meaning Lyme and just mentioning it jointly.
Yeah, the Slipway area at West Bay is already cordoned off to the public, so it is really kept down to just the users of the Slipway to use that area. So it's quite well looked after and safe already, and that is monitored from the office. And
there's been no incidents, has there?
No incidents.
No, thank you. Lee, does that clarify?
Yeah, thank you for that. And presumably we have an audit trail that says we saw the concerns, we've considered them and addressed them, or we are comfortable as a duty holder that there is no issue to address.
Yeah. The project for the Slipway we've been working on since last year, so it's been highlighted since it was first a problem.
Yeah, I think possibly, James, if we can note that they were raised on the 25th in Rhiannon's presentation, and they've been answered today. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further points? Ken, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just on the back of Lee's question there, we've also had health and safety colleagues are now going out to each of the harbours as well and doing some audits. And we'll also be talking with William Heaps fairly soon about doing another update or as part of his duties as a designated person. So that is also going on in the background.
Ken, perhaps we should have a report on that for the next Harbours meeting.
You mean the internal health and safety?
Yeah, I think it might.
Yeah.
Just a brief report, because it then demonstrates the audit trail.
Yeah, and of course there will be a Port Marine Safety Code update at the next meeting as well, so we could combine those.
Yeah, I think that would be very useful. Does that, Lee, would that, you're happy with that?
Sounds perfect.
Good. Thank you for raising that. It's an important point, and it is our responsibility as a committee. So we are always, I'm very happy to always take on board anything about safety. Are there any further points? If not, I thank you all for your contributions. I think it's been a very good meeting. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think we are ready to move forward with, particularly as we await the Harbour Revisions Order, because I think we will then see some quite significant changes to some of the ways we work and to some of the budgets, and we await those with interest. So thank you all for attending. Thanks for your contribution. Thank you to all the officers for all their inputs and excellent reports. And I think I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. You, Chair.
Merry Christmas, folks. Cheers, bye.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes.
It's getting closer. It's getting so much closer.
Yes.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.